I've got a jar of passata. This is basically crushed strained tomatoes, so no seeds. You can make your own tomato puree at home, of course. This is just fantastic for soups and sauces. And I don't want to leave anything behind, so I'm going to take some of my vegetable stock and pour it in the bottle to rinse it out, rather than using water to do it. Just give it a little shake. There we go. We'll add in the rest of our stock. A little glug of balsamic. Again, we're going for that authentic Tuscan flavor. And of course, a little bit of salt and pepper. And you may have heard me say before, I always add a pinch of baking soda to tomato-based dishes, and it neutralizes the acid of the tomatoes. And finally, for a little kick of heat, I have some dried red pepper flakes. Give it a quick stir. Increase the heat. And now we're going to let it cook for about 15 minutes until everything's nicely softened. And then we'll be adding in our bread and
Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are going to start in 1 minute. Thank you. Merci. Good morning once again, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à l'Hôtel de Ville. As we begin our meeting
Welcome to City Hall.
Council, I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe-Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the peoples and land of the Anishinaabe-Algonquin Nation and honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. For those who are able, please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you, merci. Please remain standing if you're able to, and I'll ask Councillor Luloff to introduce the performers of our national anthem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I always like to do something a little bit different. I think last term, when it was my turn for O Canada, we had a large contingent of the Governor General's Foot Guard Band come in to play. This might be just slightly louder than that. I'd like to introduce Jacob Elgin and Noah Latre they're half of the band Delonia. They have an EP coming out this summer called 1,000 Miles Away, and Jacob and Noah both honed their skills at School of Rock in Orleans. So give it up for Jacob Elgin and Noah Latre.
Great job, guys. Thank you very much. An anthem performance that could only come from Matt Luloff's invitation. Just before we start our council meeting today, there's a couple of special things that we're going to do. First of all, it is National Volunteer Week, so thank you to all the volunteers in our city. Merci à tous les bénévoles. I have the honor of going around and seeing so many wonderful people in our community who are committed to serving our city, and it's really inspiring and wonderful to witness. But today in particular, I want to recognize some dedicated volunteers who are with us today. The Ottawa Winter Trail volunteers groom and maintain trails across the city for skiing, walking, and fat biking. And the trail network encompasses quite a large area, including the Kitchissippi Winter Trail, Ottawa West Winter Trail, Britannia Winter Trail Association, Rideau Winter Trail, Ski Heritage East, and the Orleans Ski Club. And I had a chance to meet with and chat with the group of volunteers who are responsible for this amazing network in our city in the last hour. And again, I want to say thank you for making our city so much better, especially in the winter, a season that isn't my favorite, and for supporting this great asset that we have in our community that makes Ottawa amazing. So once again, thank you for what you do. Merci beaucoup. All right, we also have another special presentation to make this morning, and so I would ask you to join me in welcoming our city manager, Wendy Stephenson, and Don Herwire, who is retiring from the city of Ottawa after many years, including having served as interim general manager of planning, real estate, and economic development. Would you come forward, please? Alors aujourd'hui, nous célébrons le départ.
Today we are marking the retirement of one of our dear colleagues, Don Herwire.
Served as the interim general manager of planning, real estate, and economic development from the summer of 2022 until very recently, and he has had an impressive 36-year tenure with the city of Ottawa. 36 years. Et l'aventure a commencé en
And Don's journey began in 1985.
And I guess our adventure with him began in 1985. And just to put that in perspective, that is the year that Born in the USA was released by Bruce Springsteen, one of my favorite albums. The movie Back to the Future was released. And what else? We Are the World was recorded that year as well. And at that time, Don joined a team of 11 other summer students who were hired to do land use surveys. And I gather the technology was a little different back in the 80s, Don, a little bit low tech. But they spent the summer mapping areas for residential or commercial use. And this job complemented Don's interest in urban geography and planning, and a field that I understand was introduced to him by his urban geography teacher in grade 13. So there's another sign of how far back it was. There was grade 13 when Don was in high school, and me. After specializing in urban planning through his undergraduate and master's degrees, Don joined the city full-time in 1990, and he started as a professional planner, made his way through various roles, including manager of planning services, manager of Canada West special projects, and program manager of planning and infrastructure approvals. And with each new position, Don mastered areas such as policy, heritage, urban design, and infrastructure and park planning. And this mastery came into play with some signature projects that literally have shaped the landscape of Ottawa. Cette maîtresse a été acquise grâce à la réalisation de projets signatures qui ont littéralement transformé la silhouette d'Ottawa. That includes the role that Don played in the revitalization of Le Breton Flats and the Zibi project, really historic change in our city, and his leadership as well during the relocation process for the Ottawa Hospital Civic Campus. His strategic vision and dedication to city building have been crucial to driving these massive, transformative projects for our city. Beyond a long list of professional accomplishments, Don has been a champion for collaboration in our city. It turns out that Coaching his kids' baseball and hockey teams gave him the skills he needed to bring people together, to motivate and lead them through major projects. And there was a real emphasis on people during Don's time. After more than 3 decades of service, Don believes it is the people who matter most, people who helped him, people who taught him, people who supported, surprised, and delighted him with their imagination, their innovation, their drive to get the job done. To Don, the project came second to the people. So as we bid farewell to Don, we do so with deep gratitude for his belief in the people that he had the pleasure to lead and who had the pleasure to work with him. Don, your legacy will continue to inspire us, and we wish you all the best in your well-deserved retirement. L'héritage que vous nous laissez continuera d'être pour nous.
Your legacy will continue to inspire us.
So on behalf of City Council and the residents of Ottawa, I extend our heartfelt thanks to Don for his exemplary service to the City of Ottawa and the people of Ottawa. And I want to wish you, Don, your wife Anita, and your children Rebecca, Darren, and Lauren, continued success and happiness in the next chapter of your life. Merci beaucoup, Don. And I would now like to ask Wendy to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Mayor Sutcliffe, and good morning, everyone. I just want to take a few moments this morning to recognize Don for his 36 years of municipal service. And Don's upcoming retirement is at the end of this week, and we're saying goodbye to a very strong leader in our organization who's made such a significant impact and brought a great deal of knowledge and expertise to his many roles throughout the career. And I said to Don earlier this week that, you know, as he leaves the city, he's going to be walking, biking, and driving around, and he's going to see his footsteps. He's going to see the trail that he has led with respect to the work that he's done here at the city, and we're just so grateful for that. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Don for several years now, and I've always known him as a great advisor, a colleague, and an amazing leader. J'ai eu un plaisir de côtoyer Don pendant plusieurs années.
I had the pleasure of knowing Don for several years, and I've always known him to be a great advisor, colleague, and leader.
An incredible amount of experience over the years in a diversity of areas, including development review, policy planning, climate change, heritage, urban design, infrastructure, park planning. And he brought all of that experience with him when he was named the interim general manager of PRED in August of 2022. And during his time as interim general manager, Don worked very closely with the leadership team to navigate multiple, and I say multiples, many times in terms of provincial legislature announcements. I think the joke around the office was every Friday there was an announcement, and you know Don was in there with the team in terms of doing that analysis. But there's just been a tremendous amount of unprecedented change, you know, as to how the department functions and you know what the city is doing and how we're kind of responding and reacting to that. And as Mayor Sutcliffe mentioned, Don also successfully led the team in PRED to advance transformative files in our city that really helps shape our city's future, including our official plan, the transportation master plan, and the climate change master plan. Those are just really a few of the things that Don has had his hands on and led the work across the city. And I also wanted to highlight that he also led the department through 2 budgets. I talked about the further provincial changes that have happened with respect to the legislation, but then the official plan as well, thinking about the change that happened there and the impact on not only the planning department, but the rest of our city. Don also led Lansdowne 2.0 and the community improvement plan review. And, you know, I have not listed all of Don's accomplishments, but he's got a very long list and record of accomplishments that really speak for themselves. And, you know, but some people might not have the benefit of Don knowing how he put his people first. And Mayor Sutcliffe, I think you spoke about that a little bit. That's always been a priority for Don, And since I've been in the role of city manager, I've had the opportunity to attend events and meetings with Don and some of his leadership forums, and I've seen that. I see Don in action, and I see how the relationships you have, Don, with your people, how important they are, and the mark that you've made in your department and across the organization. And, we're very thankful for that. So thank you so much for being such an exceptional leader here. Don, you're a proven coach, mentor, and I know you're always willing to step in and help someone when they need assistance, whether it's advice or guidance. And, I've heard from so many of Don's staff how he's been there as a support from day one, when they were first employed as they move through their careers throughout the city. Don has not only made the point of being approachable and an encouraging leader for his people, but he's also been a very supportive colleague and an important member of the senior leadership team. Don, I know that you're going to be missed by your team for your steady leadership, your candor, your support, and by the senior leadership team for your expert advice, your willingness to tackle shared challenges, and I would suggest your wonderful sense of humor, of which I know you will not leave your sense of humor at the door when you leave the organization on Friday. You always have the ability to get people to smile, no matter what kind of day they're having. And you've worked on so many complex files that have a big impact in our city that have resulted in very long hours for many people, and including yourself. But I think, Don, it's your sense of humor that really kept everything going and kind of kept the glue in it, and we're very grateful for that. So to sum everything up, there's no doubt that Don is going to be missed in our organization. You've had an incredibly successful career here at the city, and you've made a lasting impact that's going to benefit the city and its citizens in the future. So on behalf of the senior leadership team, the organization, thank you, Don, for your dedication for 36 years of service. And I would also like to take a call out to Don's family, who is here supporting him this morning. Thank you so much. I'm so happy for you as you transition to your well-deserved retirement and new chapter in your career. We're going to miss you immensely. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
So, Don, you have a lot to be proud of, and many iconic things in our community that you've had your hand in. So we'd like to present you now with a gift commemorating your years of service and highlighting one of those city building initiatives that you were instrumental in. Now let's hear from Don.
Well, it's very humbling, and I just want to say that it's not about one person, it's about everyone here and all the people I've worked with through the years. So thanks to Wendy and Mayor Sutcliffe for their very kind words and best wishes. It's truly appreciated. So I was told it would be appropriate to share a few words. I know it's going to be a very short council meeting today, but I don't want to fill up the time too long. So it all started in the summer of 1964 at the maternity ward of the Civic. No, I'm just kidding. We won't go back that far. So I just want to say I've really enjoyed my career at the city. I do think back, with very fond memories of all the people I've worked with through the years. I'm not going to list the projects. I think the mayor and Wendy did a great job of that, and that's very rewarding and satisfying. But it's, as they said, it's really about the people. So the last few weeks, people have asked me, 36 years in one place, why did you stay? You could have done this or done that. How many people are going to do that today? So good question. So I've been thinking about that. So I grew up in this city. I have a real love for the city. So I think that's part of it. I took a lot of satisfaction and pride in working at the city. We do get things done. We move forward. It's been a pleasure supporting my team, building new teams, working with my colleagues and members of council to move the city forward and hopefully make a difference in a small way. And I've heard many retirees say it's not so much the work or the council meetings that they're going to miss, but the relationships and the people that they've worked with through the years. So while I may miss some of those highs of getting a project through and implemented or built, it's really about the people, as Wendy and the mayor have said. So I just want to say thank you to everyone. Special thanks to my better half, Anita, and my kids, Rebecca's here today, for their love and support, which hardly ever wavered, even when they had to read on Twitter that their dad is the most dangerous, unelected official at the City of Ottawa. So they still had my back, so that's greatly appreciated. So I wish everyone the best moving forward, and thank you for everything you collectively do for this city. Thank you.
Okay, congratulations again, Don. Now we need you to get back to work. Okay, I will now ask the council coordinator to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Luloff.
Je suis présent.
Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor Hill.
Present.
Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Grauer.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Plante.
Ici.
Councillor King.
Here.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor DeRush.
Here.
Councillor Hubli. Councillor Lowe.
Present.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes from the council meeting of April 3rd. Is those carried? Are there any declarations of interest? I'll note the other communications received on the agenda. There are no regrets that have been received. Motion to introduce reports. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mayor. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report Number 12, Built Heritage Committee Report 13, Finance and Corporate Services Committee Report 13A, Planning and Housing Committee Report 25, Transit Commission Report 12, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled, quote, Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending April 12, 2024, end quote, Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for items subject to the Planning Act, Explanation Requirements at the City Council meeting of April 3rd, 2024, end quote, be received and considered.
Is that carried? Item 11 is a status update on council inquiries and motions for the period ending April 12th. Is that received? Item 12, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, 12.1 is a motion on Georgina Falls Trust Fund allocation. Is that carried? Item 13 is Built Heritage Committee, 13.1, application to alter 253 Mackay Street. Is that carried? 13.2, consideration of objection to notice of intention to designate Bible House at 315 Lisgar Street. Is that carried? 13.3, designation of 41 Rideau Street and 73 Rideau Street. Is that carried? 13.4, designation of 8 properties in Britannia Village. Is that carried? Moving to item 14, Finance and Corporate Services, disposition of 2023 tax and rate-supported operating surplus deficit. Is that carried? Item 14.2 is the Lansdowne 2.0 procurement options. We'll hold that. Item 14.3 is the Affordable Housing Community Improvement Plan and implementing bylaws. Is that carried? 14.4 is the Economic Development Community Improvement Plan Program Update. Is that carried? Item 14.5 is the motion on Brownfield Redevelopment Community Improvement Plan. And I know Councillor Gower has a motion that is very close to a technical amendment. I don't know if we want to hold this or if people are comfortable moving through it quickly. Okay, let's introduce the motion then, Councillor Gower.
Okay, thank you. Whereas the report for the Brownfields Redevelopment Community Improvement Plan bylaw was considered by Finance and Corporate Services Committee on April 2nd, 2024, and whereas the report stipulates that a Brownfields application associated with the proposal requiring site plan control approval cannot be deemed complete until the site plan control approval application is deemed complete, and whereas the report provides for eligibility requirements that a building permit be issued within 18 months of council approval of the Brownfields application, and whereas concerns have been raised that 18 months from council approval may not provide adequate time to undertake required remediation activities related to groundwater remediation or a risk assessment approach. Therefore, be it resolved that with respect to item 14.5, motion Brownfield Redevelopment Community Improvement Plan, that the final bullet in committee recommendation 1 be amended to read as follows. Any funding approval will become null and void if a building or excavation permit is not issued within 18 months post-council approval of the Brownfields application. Therefore, be it further resolved with respect to item 14.6, Brownfields Redevelopment Community Improvement Plan bylaw, that attachment 1, part 2 be modified as follows. Program eligibility requirements. 5, any Brownfields funding approval will become null and void if the development is not issued a building or excavation permit within 18 months post-council approval of the Brownfields application. Process 2, application submits the completed package. Applications must have zoning which permits residential. For applications that require a zoning bylaw amendment to permit residential, the Brownfields application may only be submitted once an application for zoning bylaw amendment has been deemed complete, and the rest of that paragraph is deleted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gower. Is that carried? And the motion is amended. Is that carried? 14.6 is the Brownfield Redevelopment Community Improvement Plan bylaw. Is that carried?
Dissent.
Oh, sorry, as amended? Yeah. Is that carried as amended?
One dissent.
One dissent from Councillor Hill and Councillor Troster. Okay, thank you. 14.7 is the Brownfield grant application for 2 Robinson Avenue, 320 Lees Avenue. Is that carried?
Mayor, I'll dissent on all of the former Brownfield applications that are not going through the new process.
Okay.
Just
So-
for clerk to register, I don't think I need to say dissent every time, but just to register on dissent on those.
Yeah, okay. I don't know which ones those are and which,
It's the following
the next 5 or 6,
items,
I think.
believe.
So maybe just say it every time, just to be sure, sorry.
Sounds good.
Okay, so on that one, it's carried with 1 dissent, yes?
Flip it all together.
Pardon? Councillor Bradley is dissenting as well?
Could staff clarify which of these ones fall under grandfathered and which ones would qualify
Would
under
qualify
the
under
new?
the new rules? Sure.
Yeah, just so that I'd like to dissent on the ones that are grandfathered and not the ones under the new rules.
So which ones would be eligible under the new rules?
Some of they all include residential, so there would be a level of eligibility for all of them, but there's different criteria. So it's really going back to the previous criteria under the old Brownfields applications. So they're all grandfathered.
They're all grandfathered, but would any of them meet the new criteria? I thought there were a couple that would meet the new criteria.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there's 2 that have an affordable housing component, but they all have a residential housing component, so they would all meet criteria at that level.
Okay. Does that answer your question or not?
Well, not really, because some of them, I believe, are getting more than the 3 million cap that we put on. So I guess I'm trying to understand that piece.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. They are subject to the previous requirements. There's new caps in the new program. There's elements that are no longer eligible, so they go under the old rules. So the criteria is different. The financial aspects are different, but there is a level of eligibility for all of them because they have residential.
Okay, so they're basically all under the old criteria.
Okay, so are you dissenting as well then? So are you dissenting on all of them?
I'll dissent on all of them as well.
Okay, and are you dissenting on all of them? And Councillor Droster is dissenting on all of them? Anyone else? Okay, so 14.7 is, as I said, 2 Robinson Avenue, 320 Lees Avenue. Noting the dissents, is that carried? 14.8 is 126 York Street, 151 George Street. Is that carried? 14.9 is 70 Nicholas Street. Is that carried? 14.10 is 200 Barry-Beau Street. Is that carried? 14.11 is 1050 Somerset Street West. Is that carried? 14.12 is 861 Clyde Avenue. Is that carried? 14.13 is 1619 to 1655 Carling Avenue. Is that carried? Okay. Item 15 is the Planning and Housing Committee report. 15.1 zoning bylaw amendment for 84 and 100 Gloucester Street. Is that carried? 15.2 is 100 Weeping Willow Lane. Is that carried? 15.3, 6171 Hazeldean Road. Is that carried? Okay, and then item 15.4, I know there's a motion and perhaps some discussion around that, so we'll hold that. Item 16 is Transit Commission. 16.1 Light Rail Regulatory Monitor and Compliance Officer Annual Report for 2023. Is that carried? 16.2 is the Confederation Line Regulatory Framework Update. Is that carried?
Carried.
And the bulk consent agenda, is that carried? Okay, let's go back to item 14.2 on page 8, the Lansdowne 2.0 procurement options analysis and recommendations. And to begin with, I know Councillor Lowe has a couple of directions related to that. Would you like to introduce them now?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. These 2 directions, am I just reading them in, or can I also kind of spiel it a little bit? Okay. So these 2 directions recognize the fact that between now and the end of 2025, there's no real opportunity for us to do our jobs, provide the oversight over the project. And it also addresses something that had happened at the last gate, whereby one of our colleagues had requested some extra time to read the report, so figure we may as well address that now instead of possibly delaying the project and therefore possibly raise the costs when it comes time to get to the final gate in 2025. So the first direction is that staff be directed to make the final report on the Lansdowne 2.0 project public and available to members of council as early as operationally feasible while respecting the bid process, ideally 30 days prior to the date, which the item is to be voted on by council. That's the first one. And straight into the second? Okay. And the second one is that staff be directed to inform council as soon as operationally feasible through an IPD or a report to the Finance and Corporate Services Committee should any circumstance arise that was not contemplated in the staff report, such that it results in a material change to any council-approved direction or decision on the Lansdowne 2.0 project as approved, in a manner consistent with procurement best practices. In addition to that reporting, staff shall also ensure any changes to council's assumptions are specifically highlighted in the final staff report and in briefings to take place when the final report is released. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Okay. Anyone else on this item? Councillor Menard? Sorry, I saw his hand go up first.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Am I first or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just start by saying I think it's a disappointing report that has come to council. It is amazing to me to read all the work that went into the consultant's report, only to be dismissed so that we could just do things the way we've always done them. And we're abandoning the notion of a competitive bidding process, sole sourcing the project to an architectural firm that the city did not select in the first place. And despite the fact that sole sourcing a major project never leads to the best outcome, we're hoping this time it will mean that a procurement method that finished a distant 6th in scoring can be elevated to a semi-distant 4th in relation to all the other procurement methods we could have chosen. This report comes without any input or consultation of the public who will be paying for it. So disappointing is the word, but maybe that's a bit too charitable. When it comes to Lansdowne Pork, when we listen to the public, good things happen. And it brings people together, like the new inexpensive benches, patio umbrellas, and planters finally being installed that are urging at Ottawa's public square, Aberdeen Square. For that project, we consulted and listened to the public, and thank you to our park staff for executing it. This is what will bring people to come and stay at Lansdowne. It's small but impactful quality of life improvements. For Lansdowne 2.0 and this report, we haven't listened to the public and sports fans who have written to us. When I spoke to a group of scouts yesterday and talked to them about the project, the message from one of them back was that this seemed like it was going to make Lansdowne Park worse. And that comes from the fact that the Civic Center has been regularly sold out. This was a young person, and that means 10,000 fans for 67s, PWHL games and events. Building a new arena that is half that capacity is not prudent. The Red Blacks have regularly sold out games in their brief history. In response, we're reducing the number of seats at Frank Clair Stadium and increasing ticket prices while removing the roof over people's heads. When a rebuild was contemplated, no one said that the entire Civic Center would be moved, removing 58,000 square feet of precious and loved green space in the core. This is while we're spending taxpayer dollars to fight with lawyers in court to preserve golf course green space in Canada, and there's a connection there. I would challenge any of my colleagues in this room to tell me how much the city is actually projecting to lose in operations dollars for the new event center and stadium through this procurement. It's $164.9 million that is projected to be lost, and that's the optimistic projection. Another $20 million in this report for a so-called line of credit that the city will have to backstop. Staff have now confirmed this isn't really going to be paid back. It's not likely. It's going to be more long-term debt, and it's something the original LPP did not allow for good reason. The city should not be propping up for-profit wealthy business owners in this way. That's not to mention the waste that this represents. After the city invested heavily in the last decade building brand new retail that is set to be torn down, the city recently invested $23 million into the steel roof, also set to be torn down, with us continuing to pay down that loan for a facility that doesn't exist. And of course, the value of the building at $130 million, which would be torn down. All of this because the buildings they're not at end of life, but because the city wants to make Lansdowne financially sustainable. Well, guess what? This isn't financially sustainable. Over $500 million in new debt payments isn't financially sustainable. Saying the teams will only be guaranteed to stay here for another 8 years to 2032 isn't sustainable. So I ask, what's it going to take for us to change course? What's another $4 million here, another $20 million line of credit, the same old procurement model after a full-scale LRT public inquiry? For years, legions of residents tried to tell this city what was needed at Lansdowne and what was missing from the plans, but they are not listened to. In November, our office tried to make improvements to the plan with Better Lansdowne and talked about enhancing transit and active transportation, marginally increasing public realm enhancements, to preserve more green space and not waiving our cash in lieu of parks policy, to requiring more not-for-profit housing on the site, a higher amount of revenue in the deal for capital affordable housing, favoring bids that propose rental housing when that's the kind of supply we need, to building a green roof, to building a roof over the Civic Center, to limiting parking on site without taking away accessible parking and increasing accessible parking. This plan, in my view, is not good governance. It's not fiscal responsibility. And that's what we tried to do, is to bring improvements to this, but people are not being listened to, and that's why this is creating so much division in not just this community, but across the city. Ultimately, this report represents another checkpoint for a project I opposed at council last year, and one that continues to fall short. This report also brings with it additional risks and offers a sole source procurement option that I'm not convinced will deliver the public with the best results. It's for these reasons I'll be voting against the report today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just gently remind and respectfully remind everyone that we're discussing and debating what's actually included in this report and not the decision that was already taken previously, but let's carry on. But just before we go to other speakers, I just wanted to confirm on Councillor Lowe's directions, are staff receptive to those directions?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we're receptive.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks to staff for this report. I unfortunately was not able to attend the finance meeting as I was away at a conference for the library board. So I have a couple questions that I just wanted to seek clarity on with respect to the line of credit, and Councillor Bernard referenced it as well. I just want to understand, how was the $20 million, I know it's for cash flow deficiencies, but how was that number arrived at?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the $20 million was an estimate of what is required until the end of the construction period in terms of expected net negative cash flows. OSEG is taking on more risk in that period of time, and it was part of the negotiated amount. When we came in the November report, we identified all the things that were negotiated. By reducing their risk in that period, they were then more conducive to accepting a 5% interest on their equity rather than the 8%. So it was all part of the package in terms of how do we minimize their risk during the construction period.
Thank you. So it's based on projected losses annually during construction, and this is what they think they'll need for liquidity for those years, and that should be sufficient during the construction period? Is that the analysis that was done?
Unless the $10 million that the city would be contributing, the 50% is estimated of actual disruption costs.
And what level of oversight will the city have on how these funds are spent?
So we have a very rigorous process every year. It was also addressed all the recommendations of the Auditor General in terms of what we do each year as part of the review of their financial statements. In terms of the disruption costs, we will build into the agreement very detailed line-by-line items of things that we would pay for and things that we would not pay for, and also substantiation, is it a true disruption cost or is it just a general reduction in revenue? So we want to lay that out very clearly in the agreement so that, and then they would have to report on it on a regular basis, on monthly. We're still working through those details, but we need to, before we pay, we want obviously the details.
And I don't want to conflate the two. So there's 10 million for lease disruption and 20 million line of credit. One is obviously to pay for, businesses that are losing their space and to help with those lease requirements, and the other is for operational losses as a result. Like, those are two different things, correct? The lease disruption and the $20 million line of credit?
So no, lease disruption includes, so it's the stadium lease, it's not the retail lease. And so it's the lease of, OSEG's lease of the stadium event center, and it also includes retail disruption. So for example, taking out all the seats, there's going to be lost revenue associated with that. So when we say lease, it's the partnership lease.
And so then once the retail podium is complete, the $20 million is paid back to the city, and that ends our guarantee. And it's my understanding then that the $20 million is rolled into the new retail mortgage. And I wanted to understand, so I'm just using plain numbers, if the retail mortgage was $100 million, it would then be $120 million? Is that kind of how that would be paid back?
If that's what's left outstanding in the line of credit. So first of all, the city is not lending $20 million. They are financing it through a bank. It's all done through the partnership. We insisted that all this flow through the partnership. There's not a dollar coming from the city for this amount. They're financing it through the partnership like they did the previous retail. It's just an extension of what was done previously. Now, the line of credit, we have worked out a significant amount of detail since the November report to identify what would we do if there was an amount outstanding at the end. We wanted to make sure that that was cleared up, that it didn't carry on forever, because OSEG does need to be responsible for net negative cash flows after construction. And so the idea was, what is the most efficient way of, if there is an amount outstanding, to cancel that financing, and if there's an amount outstanding, roll it into the mortgage rather than having OSEG paying an equity contribution that would then end up being at 5% versus what you could refinance. And so if at the remortgage period, we're not expected to guarantee the loan, but if we are, that would come back to council at that point in time.
So who's responsible for paying off that mortgage? Is it a partnership expense or is it an OSEG expense?
It's a partnership expense.
So 50% of that mortgage is a city responsibility, essentially, as part of the partnership?
It was cheaper than having equity contributed.
So is it fair to say, though, that if they use the full $20 million and it's rolled into the refinancing, that this adds an additional $10 million contribution from the city because we're part of that mortgage?
It's part of the overall costs within the partnership. The projection, it was all included in the projections and then the November report. There are sufficient revenues to cover those costs, and we are getting 52% net distributions going forward.
So this additional cost to the mortgage is accounted for as part of the overall 419 million?
The 419 million?
So the
No,
project
that's
cost,
not our cost. It's all in the partnership. So anything related to retail is in the partnership and financed by the partnership.
right, but the partnership is the city and OSEG, so if we're adding $20 million to a mortgage, if they use that, and we're 50% responsible, that's an additional $10 million that we're responsible for in the partnership. Would that not be accurate?
Not responsible for, in terms of when we get our distributions out. And if they had contributed equity instead, our percentage equity contribution would have gone down. So right now we're at 52%. If they would have had to add in another 20 million, their equity contribution percentage goes up and we get less going forward.
So is this accounted for in the overall cost?
It is.
Okay, because it reads to me like, yes, it's a line of credit, and I think when we all think of line of credits, it's like we're borrowing this money, we use it for liquidity, we pay it back, and it's done. And in this case, they are paying it back through the bank, but then it gets rolled into a mortgage, in which adds cost to the partnership, which we are a 50% partner in. So it feels like a way to add cost to this project without it. But if you're saying in the $419 million, we knew that we were giving this $20 million line of credit and that it was rolling into the mortgage and that's already accounted for, that's one thing. But it just feels like this is a way for the cost of the project scope to just increase. Is that?
It's not in the 419 million. It's the line where we said where we were expecting waterfall distributions. It's in that number. And so we actually get that money sooner, because if we were paying equity, if OSEG was paying the equity instead, they would get that money back first.
Okay, and then based on the projections that this number was based on, do you think they're going to be coming back to ask for more money, like a greater line of credit before construction is complete? Or do the numbers seem sound to you?
Based on current projections, EY looked at the numbers for disruption costs, and that we find those numbers are very reasonable.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Mayor. I only have a few questions, and they all focus on just wanting to ensure that this is likely going to be one of the biggest decisions I have to make this term, and I just want to do what I can to help ensure that I deliver the best possible outcome for the citizens who are going to enjoy this legacy project and ultimately pay for it. And I want to focus mainly on the procurement model from the staff recommendation. Is it fair to say, given the way that staff broke down the analysis of their decision, that timing of project delivery was one of the key factors in settling on the design bid build model?
Mr. Mayor, schedule was one of the elements that was considered among the 9 other criteria. And schedule isn't necessarily speed. It was the degree to which the schedule of the project could fit in within the parameters that we were looking at. So with regards to the schedule between the various elements of the project, the number of seasons that may be interrupted, construction inflation costs, all of those elements were considered as part of that schedule analysis.
And so further to that, so the number of seasons interrupted may have been one of the factors when it comes to schedule. And is completion of project also a key determining factor in terms of schedule?
Yes, it is, Mr. Mayor, because we needed to ensure that the construction inflation metrics were assumed a completion by a certain date. And so if the project was to go beyond that, that would increase cost pressures on the project. So we needed to account for that through the analysis.
Because I can certainly understand how delays of the project could incur costs. Delays to seasons interrupted would certainly have an impact on our partner, OSEG. I can understand that. The staff analysis points to the fact that design bid build is one of the only, as I understand it, one of the only procurement models that will allow the project to proceed while the appeal process is still pending. Is that fair?
Mr. Mayor, there are certain, like progressive design build is another model that would have allowed elements to proceed while this is going on.
Because I understand that several of the models have different qualities. But with regards to advancing a model that meets several criteria, including the ability to proceed through design while an appeal is pending. Now that we understand, we learned recently that this appeal may not proceed because of changes in provincial legislation. If they're not given a date by pretty soon, that appeal may disappear. Does that factor, the factor that there may not be an appeal, has that been weighed in our consideration?
So, Mr. Mayor, we've looked at that possibility. It does not impact our recommendation because we don't know whether that legislation will pass and when.
Of course. So I've been very clear in saying that I don't necessarily believe that Lansdowne 2.0 is, as it's currently being proposed, is truly aligned with our city's current priorities. However, knowing that, and this is why I'm focusing on procurement, knowing that the project has sufficient support to pass forward, my goal has been, and my goal right now, is to ensure that what we end up with is the best possible Lansdowne. And it is quite possible that the pathway to having the best possible Lansdowne isn't necessarily the same path that has the most quickly delivered Lansdowne. And from my limited understanding of procurement models, it is clear that the selection of a procurement model can have a significant impact on the ultimate outcome of a project, both in the project that is being delivered and the relationships between partners and how those relationships play out. So I want to focus on the KPMG report. So during the Finance and Corporate Services Committee debate on the staff recommended model, we heard staff say that one of the reasons, and it's been repeated sufficiently that it's probably a primary reason, but one of the reasons that we are not pursuing procurement models that were more highly ranked by KPMG, such as Progressive Design Build, is because we don't have the internal experience with those models. And so given that this is a major public works project, certainly the biggest one that I'm going to focus on this term, given that there are likely good reasons why KPMG recommended those other models, and given that some of those other non-traditional models, like Progressive Design Build, are gaining ground and being widely adopted across many jurisdictions, shouldn't we consider hiring the expertise we need then specifically for this project? I guess my question is, if the report is saying this is the model that we recommend, and if our answer is we're not going to go with that model primarily, not exclusively, but primarily because we don't have the experience on that, should we not be considering bringing on that expertise even during the management of this project? Because not only would be positioned to follow the KPMG model, we could learn through osmosis during that time.
So, Mr. Mayor, we are going to be looking at opportunities to develop the expertise in that model. Ms. Duclos and I continue to look at opportunities to build that expertise. However, on the heels of the LRT Public Inquiry Report, it is not our recommendation to pursue that on this project.
Then can I just ask as a follow-up, seeing as how the KPMG report recommended a specific model, did we even explore whether there might be capacity out in the market to bring on the expertise to manage in a progressive design build? Did we even do that exploration?
So, Mr. Mayor, the KPMG report resulted in a short listing of models that was then subject to a supplementary analysis that brought in additional factors like our experience, the recommendations or the expectations of council around budget and approvals, sequencing certain elements related to the Ottawa environment. When we looked at all of those things on top of the analysis that we had done as part of the KPMG report, which was a pure project delivery model analysis in isolation of anything else, the recommended model rose to the top. So although it was the highest ranked in the short listing, it was not the highest ranked from staff's perspective in recommending an approach.
All right. I just want to, so thank you to my colleague, Councillor Lowe, for bringing those directions. I appreciate those. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I asked all my questions at committee. I just have one new one, and that is we received a letter from the Ottawa Construction Association, the president. Yeah, you're nodding. It seems you saw it. So their recommendation was simply just to add a general contractor into the design process because their letter, in fact, indicated they did agree with the design bid build. Because that's Atasoki and it's going well and they could see many reasons. But that was their one suggestion. What did you think of that suggestion?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. We work very close with the Ottawa Construction Association. We have bring general contractors during our design processes in various projects that apply the design bid build model. It's not something we haven't done before. It is part of our toolbox, and given this, the importance of Lansdowne, we are definitely going to look into including as part of our design the recommendations and the lens from a general contractor. There are many opportunities during design that we can use the expertise and will help only to make our design stronger.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Carr.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just have a couple quick questions for staff, just in terms of some of the language that is being used to communicate out about this report. We've heard this morning people say that we dismissed the KPMG recommendations. When I read that report, I saw models being ranked, and the final paragraph in the report is KPMG encouraging the city to go back and look at their own context to make a decision. Can we just clarify, did the KPMG make a recommendation? And if so, did we follow it?
Mr. Mayor, the KPMG report did not result in a recommendation, but a short listing of models. You're correct. We then applied that secondary analysis, and the recommendation is what's included in the staff report.
Okay, thanks. And just another clarification, much as we know that Councillor Curry was once a teacher, I think most people know that I was a federal public servant. In the federal public service, procurement is an extremely litigious procurement is litigious, and certainly I'm not familiar with the municipal regulatory framework as I am with the federal, but I'm always very cautious in terms of wording that we use. So I just want to confirm, with respect to sole sourcing, my understanding is that because it is the OSEG that is responsible for the management of the P3, that there is no sole sourcing occurring on behalf of the city with respect to maintaining the architect, correct? It's a result of continued council direction for OSEG to undertake that work, if we can just confirm that?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. And just a final thing, I really hope that we can stop referring to saying that those buildings still have life left in them. Council voted unanimously well before my time to replace those buildings. And certainly as somebody who has, as you found out at the last meeting, that has taken a tour with somebody who is from the accessibility community, that has clearly outlined that these buildings are not suitable for people with disabilities. It's a year. There are so many elements of deficiencies. This isn't the Belena Fieldhouse in my ward that receives like 100 people a year. This is a site that receives 4 million visits a year at a minimum. That was before we started scheduling more activities. I really think that we need to...
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that. Oh. Yeah, that's not technically on the motion that's before us today.
Right, I was asking for clarification on what people said.
Further point of order, it's referencing my comments, and I think staff have confirmed those buildings are not at end of life. They have confirmed that multiple times.
That's not actually a point of order, it's a rebuttal.
It's reference.
But anyway,
okay,
Councillor Carr,
can I just finish my question? So has there been any recent determination that those buildings are not at end of life since that decision was made?
Mr. Mayor, we defer back to our November report in what staff had communicated to council.
Yeah, this is more about the November report than it is about the report before us today, but...
Yeah, no, I'm just clarifying some of the comments about the procurement, because I think that it's very we need to stay on, we need to be factual.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hill? Councillor Hill?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Staff recently accepted the direction to bring the multi-residential tax ratio into alignment with the residential tax ratio. Given that Lansdowne 2.0 relies on the multi-residential tax uplift for a significant portion of its debt servicing, what financial implications might we expect to see to the Lansdowne 2.0 project if the approved direction on the multi-residential tax ratio moves forward? Might we expect that the general revenue must do a bit of a heavier lift on the cost of the project? And if so, how much might that lift be over the period of the debt servicing? I can appreciate that this is highly contingent on the final project cost, but if staff could provide a bit of clarity on this, it would be appreciated.
We would have to follow up with that. We have not done the analysis. It would all come back as part of the overall funding strategy for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Troster?
Thank you so much, Mayor. I'm just wondering if staff could clarify, with the procurement model that you're recommending in this report, is there any opportunity for a design competition or for more than one design option to be presented to council and to the public?
Mr. Mayor, if we just took a step back a bit, the design and location and how the event center and Northside stands are situated was approved by council. What we're really looking at is the details of that design in terms of the interior, and so the ability to review design is now will be through site plan control through the normal planning process applications and through the normal way that we would communicate with the public on the detailed design of the facility.
Yeah, but my understanding when we saw the drawings, when we went through the last round of conversation about Lansdowne in November, was you said, this is just a placeholder, this is not, there will be an architect who's chosen who, yes, I understand the placement of the elements in the site were approved, but what they look like is still up in the air. Am I correct?
Mr. Mayor, correct. The exterior of the building, council's already voted on no green roof, so we'll be looking at the exterior of the architecture of the building through the detailed design. The interior and program areas of that building will be reviewed by the architect and designed, and that's what we can communicate with the public through our consultation process through the site plan.
So to be clear, your intention with your recommendation in this report is to choose one architect and have one design?
Mr. Mayor, correct. It's continuing with the project architect that we have has brought us here today, continuing through to the approval of the site plan and construction.
And how is that architect selected?
So, Mr. Mayor, as per council's direction, we've been working with OSEG to deliver the detailed design elements, and OSEG engaged the architect in order to perform that work.
Okay, my objections to the financial model being recommended, and also frankly to the original project, which I won't get into because it's out of scope, had less to do with the need to improve the facilities at Lansdowne. I don't dispute that. I've become a big fan of the PWHL. I appreciate the contribution Lansdowne makes to our community, but the financial model has always concerned me, and I'm very concerned, to me, what feels like sole source contracting and really missing the opportunity to strive for design excellence here. This is the most expensive project that this council will overtake, that probably generationally we will undertake as a city, and I think we can strive for better. And frankly, Councillor Devine's question was the one I was going to ask too. My understanding was that one of the key advantages of the model that you're recommending was the opportunity to work on it simultaneously while an appeal went through, potentially at the Land Tribunal. Now we're hearing that appeal might not be a reality. Do you think that might be able to buy you more time to look at more design options, or do you still really recommend the model that's in the report, even if there's no appeal at the LTB?
Mr. Mayor, it doesn't change our recommendation on the model. The goal is to, should council approve this today, move forward on detailed design, which gets us to our target timeframes in order to pull a building permit and to go out to tender on the construction.
Okay, so I completely understand why staff is recommending this model and why you prefer it. I'm just really not comfortable with it. I'm going to have to dissent on this file. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. If we could go to a recorded vote then on the issue. Oh, yep. Councillor Lee.
Sorry to get my hand up on the computer in time. I just want to quickly pursue what Councillor Troster was talking about, make sure I understand the process moving forward. We are going to spend an additional $4 million in order to get Brisbane to get us to a detailed design. And then that design is going to go out for bids to build. And then we're going to receive a recommendation from staff for the winning bid to build that final design. So if we don't like the design that is going to go out to tender, we don't have an opportunity to say no to that until we refuse to bless the winning bid. Is that roughly correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. It would be the last gate, as we called it, in 2025, based on the funding strategy, the construction bid price, and the air rights tender price.
So that final design that goes out to the market to solicit bids, how much will council see of that?
Mr. Mayor, as we do with all our projects, we will have public information design consultation sessions like we do on any project that we deliver, along with the site plan consultation. So we are to prepare a public engagement strategy to get feedback on the site plan and on the different elements of the design that have the ability to get information and feedback from the public and members of council.
So before it goes out to tender?
Correct.
If we have the opportunity to say that corner should be rounded, it shouldn't be square, we'll have that opportunity to at least have that input?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and sorry for a gross simplification, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Okay, if we could move to a recorded vote on this, please. Thank you.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Durush.
Oui.
Councillor Plante.
Oui.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor Devine.
No.
Councillor Curry.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Clark. Kelly.
I knew it. Yes.
Councillor King.
No.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes.
Councillor Troster.
No.
Councillor Brown.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
No.
Councillor Kavanagh.
No.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Hill.
Yes.
Councillor Bradley.
No.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Carr.
Yes.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Lowe.
Yes.
Councillor Giroux.
Yes.
Councillor Kitts.
Yes.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Yes.
19 yeas, 6 nays.
Thank you. Let's move ahead to item 15.4 on the agenda, the Affordable Housing Acquisition Preservation Fund. And I understand there's a motion from Councillor Carr. Councillor Carr, do you have a motion on item 15.4?
So it's almost as if it's an amendment to the existing motion. I'll just read it out first. Whereas the 2023-2026 term of council priorities, strategic objective 1 states increase housing options, including below market and deeply affordable near transit, leverage city land and seek sustainable funding. And whereas council approved the integrated transition to housing strategy in 2023 that outlines short, medium and long-term initiatives to assist single adults experiencing homelessness to transition to housing while addressing immediate pressures in the shelter system. And whereas the city's 2024 budget committed $5 million operating funding towards this strategy to support those in the most immediate need of housing, including those living in community centers and shelters, and whereas staff and city resources are finite and expediting the work referred to in the motion would require delaying previously approved priorities, and whereas the federal government released its 2024 budget on April 16th, 2024, and there are ongoing funding announcements from the federal and provincial governments on housing, of which the details are not yet known, and whereas the LRFP can be amended in the future should the will of council be to establish an acquisition fund, therefore be it resolved that recommendation 2 of the motion be amended to read, direct staff to report back to the appropriate standing committee of council with the findings of this assessment in Q3 of 2024. So just on a personal note, I had spoken to staff about the existing timelines, and some of the work that would have had to be interrupted in order to meet the timelines include the integrated transition to housing strategy, which of course has a huge impact in my ward with 2 full community centers, also impacting the HAF applications that need to be processed and the money given out, and additionally subsequent to the Planning and Housing Committee, the federal government announced its own acquisition fund, and I had the opportunity to ask the Minister Fraser directly at an event last week if that money would be funneled through municipalities, and it's going directly to nonprofits. So allowing that time to see how that program would work, if there's a gap that the municipal potential for a program could fill is important, because we will not have the details of that for some time. So unable to have the best analysis, just moving it out a quarter. And I don't know if staff want to comment, but they were certainly supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can staff, we had a discussion at Planning and Housing Committee around this motion, and Councillor Johnson accelerated or put a deadline on the provision of the report around an acquisition strategy. Councillor Carr's motion would give you a bit more time, which I'm fully supportive of. Can I, though, please get an understanding of what the timeline for the long-range financial plan for housing is?
Mr. Mayor, yes. So I'll kind of rewind it a little bit. If you recall back in November when we tabled the budget, and then December when we adopted the budget, I stated then that we were going to bring back in Q2 the updated long-range financial plan. At that time, that was predicated on we were optimistic that the half funding announcement was imminent, was coming shortly in December timeframe. At that time, nor was I aware that I would be consumed with 6 weeks of negotiations with the province that we recently announced. And then in addition to that, there's been a flurry of continued changes, budget announcements from the province and the feds. So once I learned about this motion last week, I immediately reached out to staff and said, okay, well, I need a briefing. And as early as yesterday afternoon, or as late as yesterday afternoon is when I sent the email, because we need to shift it a little bit. So we always go through this process every year where we look at our work plan, what's reasonable, what's realistic. And given the impacts of the changes that occurred, I just don't have the time. My team doesn't have the time to kind of get a product in front in Q2. So I need a little bit more time to kind of layer in analysis for this one. So we're coming back in Q3. My commitment is we need something in Q3. The things are continuing to change. If they do continue to change ongoing, we're going to have to draw a line in the sand at some point in time to come back with a refresh, right? So we'll articulate that at that time. But right now, given the significant changes over the past 3-4 months, I just need a couple more months to kind of get that back in September. So that's where it all kind of unfolded.
I have some sympathy. Obviously, it's been difficult to keep up with the announcements. Hopefully, we get a bit of a pause in the flood of those. But I assume that once we have a new government, or potentially a new government after the federal election, that we will again have to take a look and potentially pivot. But I know my colleagues have some questions around that timing, and I'll defer to them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I'll be supporting this amendment. One of the things I think that I found really frustrating about this whole Q2 to Q3 is that really I think with a couple of sentences that would have been said at Planning Committee, we could have decided Q3 over Q2. Like the number of hours that have gone into committee time and the time in between to change it from Q2 to Q3, those hours are lost opportunity costs that staff should have been working on something else, could have been working on something else, but instead we're looking at all of this. And I say to councillors, you know, this could have been done in like 10 seconds in committee, and instead probably 10 hours of staff time were wasted on this. So it's very frustrating to me that when I turned to staff at the end of that committee at Planning and Housing and I said, is the long-range financial plan cut in stone, like it could never be changed if we had new information? And the answer was, no problem. If we had more information later on, we could change the long-range financial plan. So why do we spend 40 minutes at committee? Why are we spending all this time here now? Not that it's this much. Maybe we'll see how many people get on the speakers list. But the time in between is the time that I care about most. And I just hope that this doesn't happen again, because this is a simple thing. We've asked staff to go away and look at everything housing. The federal and provincial governments have had continued announcements, and we simply could have just said, look, as we were told at committee, you need more time for this, let us know when that would work for you. And if it doesn't, let's change the long-range financial plan a little bit after that if we get new information. So I'll be supporting this amendment, but I want to make that comment because wasted time, other than people's life hours, is money.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I would have to echo everything that Kathy or that the previous councillor just said. I would agree that this all could have looked very differently if we had had a different set of information at committee last week. You know, with the proposed amendment, we now see Q3, so we delay the acquisition report by 12 weeks. I don't see any problem with that. I can appreciate that the ground is always shifting under everyone's feet. My concern that comes up from this conversation, of course, is really the broader conversation about resources. So in the motion on the floor, we're suggesting that by adding a new piece of work, we're going to jeopardize those that are already in progress, that are certainly important to my council colleagues and to their residents. I would agree, you know, it's a great problem to have. That provincial and federal governments are taking a great interest in municipalities and are wanting to solve for the housing crisis in direct relationship with whether it's the municipality or whether it's nonprofit housing providers. But it still creates a tension, and we're in the middle of that tension now. So, I mean, I'm certainly happy to support the motion. But I'd like to understand from staff, given that we have such great pressure on us, given that we have, you know, a housing and homelessness crisis, whereby we can anticipate probably that the ground will continue to shift underneath our feet. Does the Housing Services Department and associated finance department have the resources, expertise, experience that they need in order to rise to the urgency of this moment?
Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to the finance department. So we have a team, what we refer to as a financial planner team. So in that team, they are responsible for doing the work, supported by Isabel and myself, Lansdowne, solid waste, long range financial plan, the rate, the tax, now the housing ones. And they all come at different, you know, dribs and drabs, if you will, peaks and valleys. So we're staffed to do it. It's just that when you get to this point here where we also have the solid waste master plan, long range financial plan coming, and master plan coming in June, I believe, it's always about shifting some things around, because if I added another planner, it doesn't clear the backlog, because some of it is timing. So I'm good on the finance side. It's just a matter of sometimes the staging of how all these things kind of come together within, you know, whether there's a 12-month calendar or a 16-month calendar, those are things that we got to shift around a little bit. So I'm good from a capacity perspective on that side, on my side of the equation. So I can kind of pass over to Claire for her side.
Yes, thanks for the question. And Mr. Mayor, in housing services, we do have the resources we need to conduct what we would normally be doing, which is an environmental scan, speaking to other municipalities that have similar programs. But whenever we undertake a new piece of work, we always take a moment to assess what other priorities are on our plate, and reassess and reprioritize accordingly. So I think what you heard at committee was a willingness to accept the motion because we recognize the pressures. We recognize the advocacy from the community, but also we know that this is a pivotal time. And so we're more than willing to move forward with that work in consultation with our finance colleagues with regard to the long-range financial plan.
Thank you for that, because my amendment on the motion at Planning and Housing was not necessarily to pinpoint a queue. Like, that was not my intention, which queue mattered. What I was trying to do was attach the acquisition report to the long-range financial plan so that when it came for decision at committee and council, we would have all the information we needed. My concern was that if we have a long-range financial plan that omits or doesn't speak to all of the potential tools in our toolbox, then maybe we won't be able to make the best decisions at committee and council. So I'm perfectly fine to support the proposed amendment if it makes sure that staff has the runway they need, but I do want to make sure that we're solving for the right problem. And if the problem is that we need to, as a committee and council, ensure that we have additional resources to support you to rise to this occasion, because it never stops. I mean, I don't envy anybody, whether it's within your department or whether it's in the zoning department, bless them, you know, with Dawn's team. It seems like you guys are the most popular people in town. And so we need to know that we're making sure that you can be successful in this, because residents expect it, provincial and federal governments expect it, and this council expects it. And so that was the reason you saw the behavior at committee last week, and I'm perfectly fine to support this amendment as proposed today.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I want to thank Councillor Councillor Plant for putting the Housing Acquisition Fund motion forward, and also to thank Councillor Johnson for really speaking to the urgency of the crisis we're facing right now. And I think that's what we're missing when we have a conversation about, 3 months, 6 months. In the face of a true emergency, you think a natural disaster, we mobilize, we act quickly, and we find the resources and we get it done. And I'm seeing a scale of ambition from this Council on Housing that I've certainly never seen before, and it is very, very exciting. But we need to talk about why this motion is even necessary. We are losing 31 affordable homes for every one that we build. When I was knocking on doors in 2022, that rate was 7 to 1. It's now 31 to 1. There's a building that's advertising that's about to open up in my ward. It's new rental housing. I'm looking at the list of rents here. A 2-bedroom is $3,100. A 3-bedroom is $3,895 a month. So when we talk about affordable housing loss, when we talk about evictions, when we talk about the need to have housing loss prevention, certainly a housing acquisition fund, and something we'll be discussing next week is the potential for an anti-rent eviction motion. We're talking about stopping a flood of people who are falling into homelessness because they're being priced out of our city. And I understand, Councillor Carr, where your motion is coming from. I'm perfectly happy to support it because we do have to balance needs, right? But on one hand, we're working about the integrated transition to housing strategy. We're trying to get people off community center floors and into more appropriate shelter. But the best way to do that is to stop the flood and to stop the loss early. So, as we have our conversation about the long-range financial plan for housing and the 2025 budget, I'm very happy to work with you, Councillor Johnson, and with housing staff to figure out, are we resourcing you enough to deal with what is an absolute emergency situation? Because we are asking you to be more ambitious, and every time we have an idea, it adds more work to your plate. I recognize that, but I just want to say that I don't think it was a waste of time to have this conversation at committee, and I don't think it's a waste of time to have this conversation now, because in my ward, we're dealing with a flood of evictions, largely senior women, right, who are being completely priced out of the city. And these are the folks that we're going to have to find shelter for. And it's not fair, and it's not acceptable. And I'm looking here at the rent list for private rental housing. We're not going to get it from the private market. We need innovative solutions, and we need more tools as a city. So anyway, I'm happy to support the amendment. I'm happy to support the original motion. But I do want to acknowledge Councillor Johnson for really opening up a conversation about the urgency and the scale here, because my message to staff is we want to work with you and we want to give you what you need to treat this as the emergency that it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. Councillor Plante.
Oui, si vous me permettez, avant que je pose la question, je voulais juste...
If I may, before I ask my question, I wanted to congratulate Ms. Oxley for the new position of legal advisor here at the City of Ottawa. Congratulations for this new position. My question is for, I don't know if it's Clara or somebody else. Would it be possible to do a cut and paste of what they do in Toronto or Hamilton? Or do we really have to create a new system here in Ottawa depending on the federal funding? Thanks.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Nous sommes toujours
thank you for the question. We're always willing to review the existing programs in other municipalities of Ontario. And of course, we'll look for the best practices and also where they got challenges, so that we understand fully where are the issues, the potential issues with a given program. Of course, we will be doing all this and try to avoid creating something brand new. And a follow-up, we often say that we have unique issues here in the capital. It's true, but purchasing properties for sale with affordable housing, that's a cut and paste throughout the country, whether you're in Montreal here or in Vancouver. So that's why I'm asking the question if we could do that cut and paste, because it seems to me it would be rather simple. But I wanted to ask the question if there's really a unique problem with affordable housing and purchasing. So I just wanted a clarification on it.
Councillor Carr, did you want to wrap up on your motion?
Thank you. Whoops.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I thought this would be a relatively simple amendment, and absolutely 100% agree about the urgency. I see the urgency every day when I go to my ward office and I see hundreds of people living in a community centre with only 6 showers for 200 people in the building. So that to me is urgent, and any risk to hold that up really, really concerns me. I think that's the greatest urgency, is helping the people that need help now. And we have moved mountains in the past 18 months in terms of renting, purchasing buildings. I think it's really important to note that we already have the ability to do acquisitions. We acquired Kilbourne Place in my ward with Section 37, previous Section 37 money, able to help the Ottawa Community Land Trust acquire a building. So we have that ability. So I think taking an extra 3 months in order to help the most urgent needs is speaking to the urgency. I think it's great to have a whole suite of programs available. I think the acquisition fund, thanks Councillor Plant, we need these things. In my ward, we had Herringate. We saw the wipeout of hundreds and hundreds of affordable homes. So 100% agree with the direction that we're moving in. I just think in order to do things correctly, to give staff the correct time and work on the most urgent priorities is important. So thank you very much for considering the amendment in order to make sure we can do that.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. So on the amendment, is that carried? And the item as amended, is that carried? Okay, thank you. I'm going to skip ahead to item 19 on the agenda, disposition of items approved by committees under delegated authority. Is that received? Okay, motion to adopt reports. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you. That the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 12, Built Heritage Committee Report 13, Finance and Corporate Services Committee Report 13A, Planning and Housing Committee Report 25, Transit Commission Report 12, and the reports from the City Clerk entitled Status Update, Council Inquiries and Motions for the period ending April 12, 2024, and Summary of Oral and Written Public Submissions for items subject to the Planning Act explanation requirements at the City Council meeting of April 3rd, 2024, be received and adopted as amended.
Is that carried? Motions of which notice has previously been given. Private laneway plows, Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And in the interest of time, I'll just read the therefore be it resolved clauses. Therefore be it resolved that roads and parking services staff perform a municipal scan in Canada or other comparable jurisdictions to determine if public partnerships involving private laneway clearing vehicles complementing municipal plows have been explored. And be it further resolved that if such a partnership is determined to have been explored, staff identify what the lessons learned are. And be it further resolved that staff complete an internal review of the operational feasibility and legal permissibility of integrating such a service into the city's established maintenance quality standards and current operational practices. And be it further resolved that staff report back to the Transportation Committee and Agricultural and Rural Affairs Committee in Q4 of 2024 on the outcome of the municipal scan and internal review, and if deemed operationally feasible, the high-level requirements to deliver a pilot program, including but not limited to technology, staffing, resource, and budgetary requirements. Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, the intent of this motion, again, as I just read out, is to ask staff to go away and do a bit of homework and report back to the two committees and then council on enhancing the service that's already provided by the city to residents. I know during snow events, all of our offices are typically inundated with requests as to when the plow is going to come by or ensuring that streets haven't been missed. This motion, if it is to reach the end and a final conclusion to be decided on by committee and council, is to look at enhancing the service provided by supplementing the public service provided with private resources. It doesn't look to eliminate a public service and replace it with a private one. I'd like to thank staff with all of their assistance being provided to help draft this motion, and then the support of Councillor Kelly, Councillor Tierney, and Councillor Deroux. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I look forward to the comments and debate from our colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Chair. So I've had a few conversations with staff about this motion, so I have questions for staff, but also questions for the mover. And I certainly am intrigued by any motion that is going to seek to go out and find information that we can use to implement better systems. But the motion, at least as crafted, it puts a rural emphasis while at the same time addressing it as a citywide issue. So I guess my first question is to the clerk's office, and this may just be my lack of familiarity, but the final be it resolved is that staff report back both to Transportation Committee and to ARAC. And I'm not necessarily familiar with that process of having a dual reporting system, but I suppose my question to clerk is, if staff reports back to both committees with a review of systems and a possible recommendation, and if both committees have a different outlook on what's recommended, do both competing responses from committee rise to council?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and it would be up to council as a whole to make the determination as to which committee recommendation to approve.
Okay. A question to the mover of the motion, because the problem in which you describe of there being a dead time between when private laneway contractors and municipal plows, the dead time between them, I recognize that. I empathize with that concern. I have that in my issue in my ward as well. Can I ask for clarity on why this would be reporting back to ARAC as well as transportation? Because it does seem like more of a transportation committee issue.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm a member of ARAC. I'm a rural councillor. I'm not qualified to speak on urban concerns, although I think many of us share the same ones. The request to have it report back to ARAC is simply because I'm a rural councillor, and I know this is an issue that my colleagues on ARAC face. It's simply an equity issue for me.
If it's an equity issue for you, may I ask, because in the motion it says, whereas this experience is particularly acute in rural areas, although it is a citywide issue, do you have, is there, because I'll get the question to staff in a second, but is there data to support that this issue of dead time is particularly acute in rural areas as opposed to outer urban areas?
I can't comment on what happens in urban Ottawa, but again, I'm only qualified to speak on the rural concerns, and that's something that many of my residents notice in the rural area. As for data, staff will have to answer that one.
Because it may be particularly acute across the city. So I don't know if this means that every issue that affects a rural councillor goes back to ARAC. I guess I'm still unsure of why it goes to ARAC and not exclusively to transportation. But question to staff then, can I assume that even though the motion has whereas clauses that speak to there being a particular emphasis, acuteness of this in rural areas, and that it reports back to ARAC, but may I assume that any investigations that the staff will be doing will be looking at an environmental scan of this and how any dead times apply citywide, and that any analysis or recommendations of pilot projects would be focused on a citywide implementation of anything for this, sir?
Mr. Mayor, yes. We would be very much taking a citywide approach to this review.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Councillor Brockington?
I didn't hear that last answer. General Manager, could you just repeat that, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we would be taking a citywide approach to this review.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm a rural councillor, I'm a suburban councillor, and I'm an urban councillor, because we are all Ottawa City councillors. So we all have the best interests at heart for the entire city of Ottawa. Let's never forget that. Council has approved snow clearing standards, correct?
Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Are we meeting those standards?
Mr. Mayor, yes.
Are we meeting them in the rural area?
We are meeting them across the city.
Excellent. Very good. So is this motion before us necessary?
I'm not sure if that's directed to staff, but Mr. Mayor, if I can use the opportunity, there have been other councillors that have also approached us around whether or not this would be an option to help to supplement basically the capacity that we have to clear residential streets. So what we have done is worked with Councillor Brown to make sure that we can get it to the motion to a state where we would be able to support, and that's really to review it and nothing more at this point, so that we can come back to committee with more information.
If my colleague had not brought this motion to committee and eventually to council, would you have brought a staff recommendation to committee or council asking for the time and resources to do this study?
Mr. Mayor, we wouldn't necessarily have come back to committee and council asking for it. If we are always looking at ways around how we can improve service, that's part of our ongoing work. So if it's something that we felt that, you know, there is merits to looking at, we will look at it. We already use right now a mix of contracted services and city resources to deploy services. So this is really an extension of that type of service delivery.
If we were not meeting standards, then I would be open to other options, how we could partner with private contractors to meet those standards if we were unable to do those ourselves through our own efforts. But we are meeting standards. We've just heard that confirmed in all quadrants of the city. So do we want our staff to be investing this time? I thought my residents were the last served in the city, because I continuously get people who write to me in the winter that said, our street is last in the entire city of Ottawa. I said, no, we are guided by guidelines, and your cul-de-sac that you live on is not an arterial road, and we triage these streets and you know, do some explanations, but eventually service is provided. So I'm just scratching my head, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? And if we're meeting our standards and the council-approved standards are not being called into question, why we would go down this road. So I'll listen to the discussion and the wrap-up, but I'm not yet convinced this is required.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much to Councillor Brown for moving this motion. And I've heard some comments today that I think really highlight why I'm super excited to be having a rural summit and just having everyone understand life in rural wards. And you know, I've heard some talk about data and standards, and I guess I'll address the standards issue first. I would say on a normal, let's say, you know, a 10 centimeter snowfall, I don't get a lot of complaints about the amount of time it takes to get those streets plowed. But when we get a large snowfall, it can take, and again, even if we are meeting those citywide standards, I can tell you very clearly that when it comes to a dump like that, when those citywide standards are applied, that leaves my constituents feeling very vulnerable in certain areas of the ward, because the arterial roads are prioritized as they are across the city. I think a big difference here is that my ward's over 700 square kilometers. Councillor Devine, your ward is 47.27 square kilometers. I think the scale of that is really hard to comprehend for most people. And so when neighborhoods whose roads come out onto an arterial road, and that snowplow's been by there 3 times, there's a 2-foot high snowbank blocking people from getting out of that development onto an arterial road if they need to go get food or gas for their generator, or get out for an emergency, or allow for emergency vehicles to get in. So I understand that that challenge isn't unique to the rural ward, but I think the scale of it is. And I think Councillor Brown has identified a unique opportunity here. I think this motion is, or actually it's probably not all that unique, and that's why I don't think this motion should have caused much of a stir. It's really just asking for information, asking for staff to come back with what other municipalities are doing. And I know there's some questions and concerns, and I think some of these would be addressed if we pass this motion and ask staff for that report back. So I hope that we can all just take a deep breath here and realize that this particular motion is somewhat inconsequential to the greater scheme of things. And I think it would be appreciated by the rural residents of the city of Ottawa if we looked into ways to make use of those private snowplow operators, as they're offering traveling long distance between small communities, and could easily be, you know, allowing people to get in and out of that community should there be an emergency at least. So I'm hoping that we can all support this motion and get on with it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks very much, Mayor. The the winter maintenance quality standards, I believe, are under review. They were supposed to be presented mid last year, I believe, and it's been delayed. Do you know what the timeline of that is going to be now? I'll get to the point.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, what we provided was an update to committee last fall in terms of where we stood with the review. We also indicated to committee and council that our focus was very much on the standard related to more the active transportation side, so sidewalks, the cycling network. In terms of the roads, we have not heard a lot of concerns around the level of service that's being provided. The concern on residential streets has been more a recognition that plowing residential streets is not just for cars, there's also benefits for pedestrians, especially areas that we don't have sidewalks. But that has not been really the focal point at this point.
Okay, thanks. I mean, that sort of answers my next question, which was sort of about residential streets, because I know that the standards for collectors, which don't exist in the same way that they do in the suburbs, in the rural areas, is a little better. But, you know, Councillor Kelly actually covered most of. There's nothing wrong with looking at something that has specific needs that are different from the suburbs and that are different from the urban area. And it helps that, you know, we have councillors with this level of expertise to bring forward concerns like this. And when staff come back with information relating to this motion, it's very possible that we can even say, hey, what about some certain neighborhoods elsewhere in the city or the like. So I'm going to support this motion, and I do thank Councillor Brown and the rural councillors for advocating on behalf of their communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And an interesting debate. It was back in 2019. I was the councillor who moved the motion to review the snow clearing, snow maintenance procedures, and I knew it was a big job. We had some pretty tough years there for large amounts of snow, and with the freeze cycle, it was very difficult. We're always looking at things, but I see this as citywide issues always, and I'm wondering if the mover would accept amending to just have it go to Transportation Committee. That's where it belongs. Snow clearing is part of our public works and transportation, and I think that's the fitting place to look at it. There may be more than one ward that has rural sections. I actually have some rural in mine, believe it or not. So if that would be acceptable.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the councillor's request. I'm going to say no, it would not be a friendly amendment, only because 80% of this city is rural, and Councillor Kelly did a great job encapsulating the comments and feelings of ARAC. I think it's important that rural residents have an opportunity to weigh in on this, and the mandate of ARAC does allow information items to come forward that impact rural Ottawa.
I'd like to put it forward regardless if, I'm sorry it wasn't going to be a friendly amendment, but I'd like that amendment.
Okay, so you'd like to make a motion. Can you just walk through it again, please?
Yeah. To move that that this report be studied by Transportation Committee. So remove
by Transportation Committee only, in other words. Yeah, just to clarify, and Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee does have a mandate to deal with transportation issues as they pertain to rural communities. So it is within their mandate, but I'm not discouraging you from making that motion if you choose to. Okay, do you have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bradley? Okay.
Thank you.
Do you want to just get in line to speak to?
Well, I'm going to get on later on, Mr. Mayor, but I think a good creative solution, and I've spoken to the ARAC chair. I have no issues, and I've checked with the clerk. Again, we're just going out and researching things here, but we could call a special joint ARAC Transportation Committee meeting that would solve all those issues that you speak of.
Okay,
Would you be amenable to that?
okay, I'll accept that.
You're fine with that? Okay. And to the chair of ARAC, just to confirm, you're fine with a joint meeting?
Yes, absolutely.
And Councillor Brown, you're quite fine with that as well?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor.
Great. Saved half an hour there. Thank you.
Okay. So my understanding is the motion does not need to be amended for that to be the case. So let's just consider that what's been decided. So we'll move to Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we just addressed the majority of my questions. I'm just a bit confused because we just updated our winter quality maintenance standards update, and Councillor Brockington confirmed that we are meeting those standards. So this feels like a service enhancement for rural communities. And obviously I represent an outer urban ward, and obviously we would love to have a service enhancement, although I need to give a plug to our winter operators this year. They did an excellent job, and my community was very happy. So it just feels really redundant. I'm not sure, as Councillor Brockington pointed out, what issue we're trying to solve. Private contractors have dead time. If they start to get city contracts, they won't have dead time, but are they going to prioritize the city contract, and then new private operators will pop up and they will have dead time? And I'm not sure it's our job to fill their dead time when we're meeting our own service standards. Operationally too, it seems like it would be very difficult to coordinate where that dead time exists. I don't know how this would work with our unions that we already have. It just feels like an operational nightmare, and staff resources are very finite right now. And as Councillor Curry points out often, that we need to be respectful of the impact that this has to our staff. So I'm finding it hard to believe, and Ellen, again, you clarified, but you have the resources to do this. This isn't diverting any of your staff attention to anything else?
Mr. Mayor, no, this is something that we can incorporate into our work plan for this year. The other piece too that I just want to take the opportunity is there really are two separate items. The level of service is one item. How we deliver that on that level of service is a separate item. The discussion, I'm not taking this direction from this motion as a review of our level of service. That's the discussion that we've been having as part of our maintenance quality standards, and that very much is a council decision from a policy perspective. What we're taking this as a review is around how we deliver on that level of service. And as I mentioned before, we already use a mix of city staff and also contracted resources. This is looking at would a different mix of different types of contracted resources help us from an efficiency around how we're delivering the service, but it's not about trying to change the standard or trying to improve upon the standard. It's about basically our ability to meet on the standard that's approved by council.
Okay, so to the mover, is the intent of this motion for you to improve standard snow clearing for your residents, or just to change who delivers that service?
And thank you for the question. The intent is to enhance the service that's already provided. So if there's a way to do that, leveraging the private sector, I'd be interested in that information. Or if it's not possible, I'd like to know that as well.
So it seems to me that staff and the mover have different expectations of this review. The mover expectation is to enhance service standards for rural communities, and staff's expectations are to look at how we deliver the same service standards. So that's a bit concerning to me in general, that there's two different expectations out of this review. So Ellen, does that change your opinion of this review based on what the mover's intent is?
Mr. Mayor, no, because at the end of the day, if our review comes back out and hypothetically indicates that basically by using all of these resources, we're still able to deliver the service cost effectively and do it quicker, then we would bring that back. But that would be a very different decision from council, because that's a policy decision around the level of service that we're trying to provide, and that's a discussion that applies across the board. Because when we look at level of service, we look at level of service across the city. A residential street in rural, urban, suburban is treated the same way from a service perspective. So it would really be a separate discussion at that point.
Okay, so I think there is some confusion here about what people's expectations are out of this review. I will support the amendment that it goes to a joint committee, but will not support the motion.
Okay. There is no amendment for it to go to a joint committee. That's just, we don't need an amendment to do that. That's just a decision that's been taken. Is that correct? We don't need an amendment?
So, Mr. Mayor, the current motion would allow the chairs to fulfill it by holding a joint meeting. If the original mover wishes to, if we want to have a formal amendment to add that specifically, that would also be in order.
Okay. But it's not necessary.
That's right,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. An amendment is not necessary to allow for a joint meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Hubley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question question to staff here. Alain, we talked about this for, back into the previous term as well as this term. Something's wrong. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, technical glitch there. We talked about this going back a couple of years now. Because my area is a little unique in that more than half of the service is provided by a private contractor and not city staff. It's supervised by city staff, but the delivery is a private contractor. And I like where the councillor is going here with trying to find a way to improve upon the service that's provided to our residents currently. Now, through those discussions we've had in the past, you wanted you highlighted that there was concerns with how to implement this, and I fully understand that and shared your concerns. But if you're going to now study as a way to implement a pilot for the rural area, can we get agreement that you will also look at some of the suburbs as well, where we don't have the same level of service as a downtown ward, for example, where they're out doing the bike lanes right away. In some cases, we have kids walks that are full of snow and ice because we're not. I don't want to leave the impression that improvements haven't been made, but to me, there's always room to get better, and if we can do it without increasing the cost to taxpayers, then even better. So can I get an agreement from you that if you will do a rural and a suburban ward at least?
Mr. Mayor, the review, as I mentioned before, is going to be with the citywide lens. So any recommendations that may come out of that will be in the context of that citywide lens. So at this point, I don't want to speculate. Will it include a suburban ward, a rural ward? I think we'll do the review and then see what recommendations we bring back to committee, or what information we're sharing back with committee at that point.
But you're saying you will do the consideration of it, because I've been asking for that for a while now. And,
oh yes, and that's why I'm saying.
We've had some good ideas on how this could be done.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. Okay. And again, we're going to be applying the citywide lens to this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Mayor. We're spending a lot of time on this, and I wish we wouldn't, because there's a simple solution to this, and this thing should be part of the WMQS. It is something that should just be looked at as part of the winter maintenance quality standards. We've been, I think, 3 or 4 years now, we've been discussing those. There's been a lot of good work by staff. And I think the first thing I want to do is thank the operators that the city already employs, who have been doing a fantastic job in all areas of the city. So kudos to you. You've been doing an amazing job out there. And this motion would seem to take away from some of that. I personally think that generally we're doing a very, very good job. I know there was an over budget this past year. That returned money. I think this past winter we'll probably fix that for next time around when we see it. But this is an issue that you see all the time. I see private operators going by my street to dig out a certain private laneway and going back, and then I might see the city plow later. Or I see the city plows first and then the private operator go. It happens all the time. We're not going to be hiring all these private operators to then do the job that the city already employs them, personal operations and private operators, to do this job. But it seems ludicrous to me. So I guess I'm fine with a review of looking at other cities and how they might do their operations. But we have the winter maintenance quality standards that are already going on. So we're going to have a joint meeting just about this issue, but we haven't had the update of the winter maintenance quality standards yet. Right? So why can't this just be referred to the winter maintenance quality standards and come as part of that discussion when we have the meeting that Councillor Tierney's talked about, which I think is a good idea. Let's have a joint meeting, but like not just on this. let's have a joint meeting on like the quality standards that we all want to come to council. So would this not make sense to go through the WMQS process that you as part of your review?
Mr. Mayor, we can certainly bring it at the same time. I still consider them to be two separate issues. The maintenance quality standards that we've been discussing is around what is the level of service that council wants to see for a community. The motion that's before us is speaking around how we deliver on that level of service. And yes, we're always looking at how do we make our operations more efficient, but we make them efficient in the context of council's mandate. So we can certainly bring them at the same time. I would just treat them as two separate matters, though.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe that can be direction to at least have more things on the agenda than just this. To say, let's bring the report back with the WMQS. Can be separate issues, but let's bring it when the WMQS comes back. I know the Transportation Committee Chair also applauds the staff work that's been done here. And hopefully the WMQS, when it does come back, which I think is scheduled for, is it this fall or is it next? Okay. So I don't know if that gives you, does that give you enough time?
Mr. Mayor, if that's a direction, we can certainly take that away and see if we can try to line up both items at the same time.
I'll leave it to you, but I think that direction makes sense so that we're not just talking about this one issue, which I think, quite frankly, is, we all see it in every part of the city, but I don't think it's an issue we're going to solve without a ton more money into the system, paying other private operators when I don't think it's a fix. They're not going to, anyway, look, I don't believe it's a fix. I'm not going to go on and on, but I'll give that direction, Mayor, and then hopefully we can just solve this. Thanks.
Can you just be more explicit about the direction, please?
Just that the report that comes with this is considered as part of when the WMQS report comes back to Transportation Committee, which staff have been doing a lot of work on. Just so that we're not just discussing this as a joint meeting. It's not just this one topic, there's other things to discuss there. Yeah.
You're okay with that?
We would accept that direction, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tierney?
Great, thank you for that. It's funny, my colleague is quite correct. We spend our time on some of what I find the most strange and weird details. I mean, curious. Soft landscaping, we spent, quite a bit of time on that where we all agreed to it. Who was going to disagree against it? But we do it because we want to have those discussions. That being said, I did hear from some council colleagues that were, I don't want to say disparaging, please don't take it that way, but I've watched over many years. The last few years have been absolutely ridiculous, the amount of work that we put on our operators. I've spoken to them, I go into the shops with Vice Chair Kitts on a regular basis. I speak to them. When we had those massive snowstorms and they didn't have their holidays and they didn't have all these things because they were working for our city and they were working, burning both candles at the end. You could see how much passion they have for this city and how we have the best streets throughout all of Canada. When you have Bill Carroll of CFRA saying that, probably one of the most critical people, we have great seats and great streets. So that being said, we had 79 winter events, 45 major snow events in that one year. The 100-year storm is every couple of years. We don't know when it's going to come. You can't, we have 557 or 75 pieces of equipment on the street. Well, when we get dumped on by snow in a major way, you can't go out and build a grader overnight. You got to be prepared for it in a way that's kind of fiscally responsible. If what is being asked here today is just to look at the idea of it, and certainly it's just having a look. Staff support it. Am I wrong on that? Staff are quite fine with this. They have the bandwidth. They're able to do it just to have a look at it because those rural areas, while we're busy digging out under massive amounts of snow, we also have to deal with unions and all those other things. There's a lot of stages to go through. But staff, you do support this. That's correct?
Mr. Mayor, correct.
Great. So I'm having a bit of a struggle, Mr. Mayor, why we're turning ourselves into pretzels to find a way to vote against something that is going out to look at something. We do it with a whole series of things from cycling to pedestrian stuff. There's some really neat, innovative ideas in other municipalities. If it's found in another municipality, great. Maybe they won't find it. But there's no decision point here today except for let's look outside the box. Because at this point, what we're doing now is burning our employees out, and we don't have the money to sustain and have, fields of plowing equipment. So for those massive hits, maybe this is an opportunity, maybe it's not. But what is the harm in looking at it? And I encourage the work to take place prior to winter quality maintenance standards, which I'm very tightly wed to. I think it's important that there's certain services in the city, through our city manager, ensuring that we plow the roads, we street sweep, we pick up the garbage. Those are core services. So I rarely ever use 5 minutes of talk time. I won't. But I did want to say to council. Tick. Oh, stop, Mr. Mayor. But this is the passion I have on this specific one. I think it is very critical to at least have a look at it. If you find yourself not wanting to support that, keep in mind other colleagues are going to have ideas that I've supported in the past that I don't necessarily support, that we've proceeded to go ahead on. And I've convinced other members of council to say, let's just have a look, stop pointing at the sign. Let's give the opportunity this term of council where we see such a collegial working group together. I might not support some ideas, but why it doesn't hurt to look at them. And I think we have to take that into account when we make this vote here today. So, Mr. Mayor, I know you'll probably have some wrap up or maybe the mover of the motion. I think we found some good solutions. No, I'm going right down to the zero. No. Right down to the zero. I got this suit for today for a reason. So, that being said, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask for please. A specific call for yeas and nays after the final speaker, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you want to wrap up?
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I did not anticipate taking so much time of council today. Thank you for all of the comments. Councillor Tierney, Councillor Derouche, thank you very much for your willingness to adapt on the fly. Mr. Mayor, for the support that you've given me in the past, and certainly to our operators, as our colleagues have said, they do a great job. This motion in no way takes away from that good work. It's all about trying to do better with the good system that we have. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll close. Thank you.
Okay, just to be clear, we are voting on this being brought to a joint committee meeting of Transportation and ARAC that will also include the winter maintenance quality standards, correct? Okay. What's that? At the same time as, yes. Isn't that the direction that staff accepted? Yeah. It's a joint committee of ARAC and Transportation.
But, and again, I'm not the original mover of the motion. It's been amended a couple of times. It's certainly, when it comes back, we can do the joint at the winter quality maintenance standards. But obviously, by us passing this today, work will proceed with doing the investigation and look at other municipalities to take part in that final decision when we get to WMQS.
Okay. Everybody clear? Is it carried? Thank you. Pardon?
Sorry, I called for votes on that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, recorded vote then.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Durush.
Yes.
Councillor Plante.
Oui.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor Devine.
Yes.
Councillor Curry.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Kelly.
Yes.
Councillor King.
Yes.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes.
Councillor Troster.
No.
Councillor Brown.
Yes.
Councillor Hubley. Councillor Menard.
Sure.
Councillor Kavanagh.
No.
Was that a no? Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Hill.
Yes.
Councillor Bradley.
No.
Councillor Brockington.
No.
Councillor Carr.
Yes.
Councillor Lulaf.
Yes, but I don't like David anymore.
Councillor Lowe.
Yes.
Councillor Giroux.
Yes.
Councillor Kitts.
Yes.
Mayor Sutcliffe.
Yes.
21 yeas, 4 nays.
Motion is carried. Thank you. So we do have an in-camera item to discuss today. So we are going to move in camera now, and I'll ask Councillor Curry to make the motion to move in camera, and then we'll take a short break to do so. Councillor Curry?
Be it resolved that the rules of procedure be suspended to permit the receipt of a briefing from the city manager with respect to the organizational alignment of the City of Ottawa. And be it further resolved that City Council resolve in camera pursuant to Procedure Bylaw 2022-410, subsections 13.1b, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including staff. 13.1d, labor relations or employee negotiations, in order to receive a briefing from the city manager with respect to the city's organizational alignment.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Is that carried? We'll take a 5-minute break and then resume in camera. Thank you.